The entire village behind the mountain had fallen into a madness it had never known before. That old well was no longer a well. It had become a gaping wound in the earth, a black spring endlessly vomiting darkness and despair. Thick, foul-smelling black water gushed upward, alive and hungry, chasing after the screaming villagers who fled in every direction. Those who were touched by it did not live to tell. Their cries turned inhuman, their skin blistered and turned to charcoal, their bodies contorted and froze in the agony of death, their faces forever twisted in silent screams. My father clutched my mother's hand and mine, dragging us through the chaos. Around us there were shouts, sobs, and the sickening hiss of bodies burning as the black water touched them. We didn't dare look back, but behind us, the cold and the stench were gaining fast. The village paths we had known all our lives had become alien and deadly, the black water seeping out from the cracks and corners, cutting off every route of escape. "The ancestral hall!" my father shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. It was the oldest building in the village, said to be blessed and protected by the ancestors themselves. It was the only place left to run. We stumbled through the high wooden doors, along with a few others who had managed to survive the flood. Together the men slammed the door shut, forcing the heavy wooden beams into place. From outside came the dull, terrifying thuds of something striking against the door, the sound of the black water pressing in, accompanied by the distant screams of those left behind. Inside, the dim candlelight flickered across hundreds of ancestral tablets arranged on the altar. The survivors collapsed on the floor, gasping, trembling, faces pale with exhaustion and horror. My mother held me tightly, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the pounding continued. The black water was alive. It hissed and whispered as if breathing, searching for a way in. "It can't be stopped," an old man muttered, staring blankly into space. "Nothing human can stop that." The air inside grew heavy with hopelessness. Despair had entered the hall long before the black water could. Then, from the shadows, came the frail voice of the oldest man in our clan, an uncle so old and silent that few remembered the sound of his voice. Supported by two men, he raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the farthest end of the hall. "Open it," he whispered, barely audible. "The box. Our ancestor left it. He said never to open it unless the whole village faced extinction." My father hesitated, and climbed the altar steps and took down an old, dust-covered wooden box. It was plain, unmarked, blackened by time. He lifted the lid carefully. Inside there was no gold, no relics, only three strange objects: a brittle, yellowed book bound in thread, a cold bronze 8-sided mirror, and a small bundle of dried herbs tied with red silk. The cover of the book bore 4 ancient characters written in ink: Fuyuan Lu, the record of blessed wishes. My father turned the fragile pages. They were filled with strange symbols and charms and fragments of stories, one of them about the well and the woman they once called Mistress Chui Rong. The truth was far crueler than the rumors. Ji Rong had not simply been drowned. She had been nailed alive inside a specially made wooden cage buried deep in the well, together with her favorite opera costume and a pair of embroidered shoes. The sorcerer who sealed her rage had left behind this book, the mirror, and the herbs, warning that if the seal ever failed, these tools could be used to restore it, but only at great cost. The book described the ritual as a bargain with the beast itself. On the last page, drawn in red cinnabar, was a crude map leading to a place beyond the village, deep in the mountain, a pit marked with 2 characters, Yashua, the elegant hollow. Next to it were faint words: "Beneath 3 feet of earth, there may be life." The old uncle's eyes suddenly lit up. "Yes, I've heard that name. They say whoever goes there never returns." Outside, the pounding grew violent. The door moaned under the pressure. Black liquid began seeping through the cracks, dripping onto the floor like ink. There was no more time to think. My father stood up, his face set in grim determination. "A few stay here and guard the hall. The rest, grab shovels, anything you can, and follow me." Driven by terror or courage, or both, a few men rose to their feet. Together we opened the side door and slipped into the night, avoiding the main flow of the black tide. The world outside was silent, except for the hiss of the black water corroding everything it touched. Above us, the night sky hung heavy, and the village below looked as if it had been wrapped in a living, pulsating web of darkness. The mountain path was treacherous, and the air smelled of rot. After what felt like an eternity, we reached it, the elegant hollow, a shallow pit on the shadowed side of the mountain where sunlight never touched. The air there was colder, the ground bare, the rocks sharp like broken bones. Following the map, my father struck his shovel into the ground. The soil was frozen and unyielding. One by one the others joined him, digging with bleeding hands, driven by pure desperation. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every heartbeat echoed in the silence. Then a metallic clang rang out. Someone had struck something hard. They dug faster, pulling away the dirt. Beneath it lay a small, decayed coffin, too small for an adult. When they pried open the lid, there was no corpse inside. Only a neatly folded child's gray garment, and resting on top a tiny, rusted longevity locket engraved with the words, "May you live 100 years." According to the book, the sorcerer who sealed Qirong's fury had taken the clothing and charm of her dead child, buried separately in this cursed place, to bind her spirit with the grief of her lost bloodline, sealing her rage even tighter. My father picked up the locket. It was so cold it burned his skin. Taking a deep breath, he opened the book and began to recite the ancient incantation written there, the An-Kun chant, long and twisted, older than any language we knew. The moment his voice rose into the still air, the ground trembled. Down below in the village, the black tide froze mid-flow. Then, from the direction of the well came a sound that ripped through the night, a woman's shriek filled with pain, vengeance, and centuries of grief. It pierced the sky, shaking our very bones. The black water began to recoil, retreating, pulled back by some invisible force toward the well. It drained rapidly, leaving nothing behind but scorched, lifeless earth, as if every drop of vitality had been drained away. The tide collapsed into a massive whirlpool, swirling back into the well, until at last, with a final, soul-wrenching cry, the storm ended. The shadow of a woman in a torn chi-paw shimmered above the well for a moment, her face twisted in sorrow, before vanishing into the night. Silence fell. The wind stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. Moonlight poured over the ruined village, over the shattered ancestral hall where survivors huddled in disbelief, and over us, mud-stained, bleeding, trembling at the edge of the hollow. In my father's hands remained only the dried herbs, the cold bronze mirror, and the rusted little locket that pulsed faintly in the moonlight. The well had been sealed again, its hatred pressed down by its own suffering, but every soul there understood. It was not gone. The thing below was merely silent, not dead. The last line of the record of blessed wishes lingered in our minds, etched like a curse. The root of vengeance runs deep, unbroken through 3 generations. The seal shall fail when the 3rd is born. Perhaps our generation would live in peace, but the debt was not repaid. When time thinned the power of the seal and memory faded into legend, that old well would awaken again, and when it did, the shadow of a pair of embroidered shoes would drift above the mountain village, waiting patiently for the next generation to pay what was never truly buried.